Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something you interact with every single day, but probably never think about. The humble door. That rectangular barrier between you and the rest of humanity that somehow managed to shape civilization, start wars, and make architects weep with either joy or despair for the last 10,000 years. So before we crack open this particular entrance, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy having your mind blown by the most mundane objects imaginable. And let me know in the comments what's the weirdest door you've ever encountered. Trust me, after tonight, you'll never look at your front door the same way again. Now, settle in, maybe grab something to drink, and let's step through the fascinating, frustrating, and surprisingly dramatic history of humanity's favorite barrier. So, you think doors are just wood and hinges? Sweet summer child. You're about to discover that doors have more drama than a reality TV show and more engineering than a space shuttle. Before you could even dream of having privacy, before you could slam anything in anger, before you could dramatically pause in a doorway for effect, someone had to invent the door. And let me tell you, humanity's relationship with doors is more complicated than your average romantic comedy. It's a tale of security, status, and the eternal human need to keep things out while letting other things in, preferably with style. Picture this: you're a cave person, not caveman. Because we're being inclusive here, but cave person, you've got your nice little cave, your fire that took you 3 hours to start, your collection of pointy sticks, and your growing concern about bears. Big, hungry bears who think your cave looks like a drive-through restaurant. What do? You grab the biggest rock you can move and you block the entrance. Congratulations, you've just invented the world's first door. It doesn't swing. It doesn't have a handle, and it definitely doesn't have a peephole, but it keeps the bears out and your intestines in, which frankly, is all anyone can ask for from early home security. But humans, being humans, couldn't leave well enough alone. Someone, probably the same overachiever who invented the wheel, looked at that rock and said, "You know what? This is inconvenient. Every time I want to leave, I have to move this boulder. Every time I want to come back, I have to move it again. There has to be a better way." And thus began humanity's 10,000-year journey to perfect the art of the entrance. The ancient Mesopotamians, who gave us writing, agriculture, and the first recorded complaints about teenagers, also gave us the first proper doors. Not the swing, on hinges variety we know and love today, but something far more practical and infinitely more annoying to install. Picture a wooden slab, heavy enough to stop an ox, hung from the top of a doorway with leather straps or rope. To open it, you had to lift the entire thing up and slide it sideways. It was like doing a deadlift every time you wanted to check the mail, except there was no mail because it wouldn't be invented for another few thousand years. These early doors served multiple purposes. First, obviously, they kept things out. Wild animals, weather neighbors who wanted to borrow your best spear again. Second, they kept things in. Your children, your livestock, your secret stash of grain that you were hoping would last through winter. And third, most importantly, they made a statement. They said, "I am civilized enough to have a door and wealthy enough to afford the wood and labor to make one." In ancient Mesopotamia, having a door wasn't just practical, it was a status symbol. The bigger and more elaborate your door, the more important you were. It was the ancient equivalent of having a luxury car, except instead of horsepower, you measured your success in how many oxen it took to move your entrance. The Egyptians, never ones to be outdone by anyone, especially when it came to architecture and showing off, took the door game to an entirely new level. They didn't just want functional doors, they wanted doors that would make the gods weep with envy. Egyptian doors weren't just barriers, they were statements of power, artistry, and the kind of disposable income that comes from having an entire civilization build your monuments for you. Egyptian doors were carved from precious woods that had to be imported from distant lands because, apparently, local wood wasn't good enough for pharaohs. Cedar from Lebanon, ebony from Nubia, woods so expensive that the door itself was worth more than most people's entire houses. And they didn't just slap these doors together with some basic hinges and call it a day. Oh no. Egyptian doors were masterpieces of engineering and art, covered in gold leaf, inlaid with precious stones, and carved with hieroglyphs that probably said something like, "Knock first" or "Face the wrath of the gods," but in a much more poetic way. The hinges alone were works of art. Bronze pins as thick as your wrist, polished to a mirror shine, mounted in sockets carved directly into stone door frames. These weren't doors you could kick in during a moment of passion or frustration. These were doors that required planning, engineering, and probably a small crew of servants just to open and close properly. The sound they made when opening wasn't a simple creak. It was a deep, resonant groan that announced to everyone within a quarter mile that someone important was either coming or going. But the Egyptians didn't stop at just making impressive doors for their palaces and temples. They also figured out that doors could be symbolic, metaphysical, spiritual gateways between worlds. The door to a tomb wasn't just keeping grave robbers out, it was the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Cross that threshold, and you were entering sacred space, a place where the normal rules didn't apply, and where disturbing anything could curse your entire bloodline for generations. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, the Greeks were developing their own relationship with doors, one that was characteristically Greek in its complexity and overthinking. The Greeks didn't just want doors, they wanted doors with meaning, doors with philosophy, doors that could inspire lengthy debates about the nature of boundaries, thresholds, and the metaphysical significance of being inside versus outside. Greek doors were typically made of wood, but not just any wood. Different types of wood had different meanings and properties. Oak for strength and endurance, olive wood for peace and wisdom, cypress for mourning and remembrance. The choice of wood wasn't just practical, it was philosophical. Your door wasn't just protecting your house, it was making a statement about your values, your beliefs, and your understanding of the cosmic order. The Greeks also invented the concept of the door knocker, though theirs were far more sophisticated than the simple rings we use today. Greek door knockers were often sculpted heads of gods or mythological creatures. Knocking on someone's door wasn't just announcing your presence, it was invoking divine protection, asking the gods to witness your visit and ensure safe passage across the threshold. The knocker itself was often the head of Hermes, the messenger god and protector of travelers, because apparently even crossing someone's doorway required divine intervention. But Greek doors weren't just about religion and philosophy, they were also about drama. Literally. Greek theatre used doors as crucial plot devices. The central door of the stage building, the skene, was where all the important entrances and exits happened. Gods descended from above, heroes stormed in from stage right, but the real drama, the life-changing revelations and tragic deaths, those happened at the door. The door was the boundary between the known and unknown, between safety and danger, between one act and the next. The Greeks understood something that modern people often forget: doors are inherently dramatic. Think about it. How many crucial moments in your life have happened in doorways? First dates, job interviews, saying goodbye, coming home. The door isn't just a barrier, it's a stage, a frame for all of life's most important scenes. The Greeks built their entire dramatic tradition around this simple truth. Then came the Romans, who looked at everyone else's doors and said, "Nice try, but watch this." The Romans didn't just want doors, they wanted door systems, door networks, doors that could handle the traffic of an entire empire. Roman doors weren't just functional, they were logistical marvels, engineered solutions to the problem of moving people and goods efficiently through increasingly complex urban environments. Roman houses, especially the houses of the wealthy, weren't just homes, they were compounds. Multiple buildings, courtyards, gardens, all connected by a complex network of doorways, gates, and passages. The main entrance, the anua, wasn't just a door, it was a carefully designed transition zone that controlled how visitors experienced the house. You didn't just walk into a Roman house, you were processed through it, guided from public space to semi-private space to private space through a series of increasingly exclusive doorways. The Romans invented the vestibule, that awkward little room between the outside door and the inside of the house where you're not quite outside, but not quite inside either. It was a buffer zone, a decompression chamber where visitors could adjust to being in someone else's space, while the household could decide whether or not they actually wanted to let these people in. The vestibule was the Roman equivalent of screening your calls, except instead of letting it go to voicemail, you let people stand in a small, uncomfortable room while you decided if you were home or not. Roman doors also had to handle security on a scale that previous civilizations hadn't really considered. This wasn't just about keeping out wild animals or the occasional thief. This was about protecting valuable property in cities with hundreds of thousands of people, many of whom were enslaved, exploited, or just generally unhappy with the current distribution of wealth. Roman doors had locks, multiple locks, backup locks for the locks, and slaves whose entire job was to stand by the door and look intimidating. The Roman lock was a marvel of ancient engineering, a complex mechanism of bronze or iron that required a specific key, not just any old piece of metal shaped vaguely like the lock. Roman keys were works of art in themselves, often worn as rings or jewelry, both practical tools and status symbols. Having a key meant you owned something worth locking up, and wearing that key where everyone could see it was a way of advertising your wealth and property. But Roman doors weren't just about security and status, they were also about religion. The god Janus, for whom the month of January is named, was the god of doors, gates, transitions, and beginnings. He had two faces, one looking forward and one looking back, because doors are inherently about transition, about moving from one state to another. Every Roman door was under the protection of Janus, and crossing a threshold was a sacred act that required proper respect, and often a small offering. The Romans also understood that doors could be weapons of war. Roman military engineering included specialized equipment for dealing with enemy doors, battering rams, siege towers, and various devices for breaking down, climbing over, or tunneling under whatever barriers the enemy had constructed. Roman soldiers weren't just trained to fight in open battle, they were trained to take cities, which meant they were trained to defeat doors, walls, and gates on an industrial scale. As the Roman Empire spread across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, Roman door technology spread with it. Local craftsmen learned Roman techniques, adapted them to local materials and conditions, and gradually, the Roman way of making doors became the European way of making doors. When the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed in the 5th century, the doors outlasted the empire. Roman door technology, Roman lock mechanisms, Roman architectural principles all survived the fall of Rome and continued to influence European construction for centuries. The medieval period brought new challenges and new solutions to the ancient problem of the door. Medieval Europe was a dangerous place, full of wars, raids, invasions, and the general chaos that comes from having too many kings and not enough kingdoms to go around. Medieval doors weren't just about privacy and status anymore. They were about survival. Medieval castle doors were less doors and more fortifications. The main gate of a medieval castle wasn't just a door, it was a complex defensive system involving multiple layers of barriers, each designed to slow down, confuse, and ultimately stop any attackers who might be unwise enough to try to force their way in. The outer gate, the portcullis, the inner gate, the murder holes in the ceiling for pouring boiling oil on uninvited guests. All of these were part of what we might generously call a door, but which was really more like a death trap disguised as an entrance. The portcullis, that heavy iron grate that could be dropped to block the entrance, was perhaps the ultimate medieval door. It wasn't hinged, it didn't swing, it didn't slide sideways. It dropped. Straight down, like the hammer of an angry god, powered by gravity and counterweights and operated by teams of men whose entire job was to decide who lived and who got crushed. The portcullis was a door that made its decisions final and irreversible, at least until someone could figure out how to lift a half-ton of iron bars back up to the ceiling. But medieval doors weren't all about warfare and defense. Medieval churches developed their own door traditions, doors that were less about keeping people out and more about creating the right state of mind for worship. Medieval church doors were massive, heavy, imposing structures designed to make you feel small and humble as you approached them. They were covered in religious artwork, scenes from the Bible carved in wood or stone, designed to teach and inspire and occasionally terrify the mostly illiterate population. Medieval church doors also served practical functions. They were bulletin boards, places where official announcements were posted, where community news was shared, where people could find out about everything from tax collection to upcoming festivals. The church door was the medieval equivalent of social media. Except instead of scrolling through your feed, you had to actually walk to the church and read whatever had been nailed to the door that week. The famous incident in 1517 when Martin Luther allegedly nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg wasn't unusual, because he was posting something on a church door. Church doors were covered in postings. It was unusual because what he posted ended up splitting Christianity in half and launching the Protestant Reformation. Doors, it turns out, are excellent platforms for starting religious wars. Medieval houses, for those fortunate enough to have houses rather than hovels, developed their own door traditions. Medieval doors were built to last, constructed from thick oak planks, held together with iron bands, and studded with iron nails, not just for decoration but for strength. These doors were designed to survive not just daily use but the occasional siege, raid, or very enthusiastic tax collector. Medieval door hardware was a craft unto itself. Hinges weren't just functional, they were decorative, often shaped like leaves, flowers, or mythological creatures. The blacksmiths who made medieval door hardware were artists as well as craftsmen, creating pieces that were beautiful as well as functional. A well-made medieval door with elaborate ironwork wasn't just a barrier, it was a work of art, a demonstration of the homeowner's taste and the craftsman's skill. Medieval locks were marvels of mechanical complexity, especially considering they were made entirely by hand without modern precision tools. Medieval lock mechanisms involved springs, tumblers, wards, and keys that were often works of art in themselves. Some medieval keys were so elaborate and beautiful that they were passed down through generations as family heirlooms, treasured not just as functional tools but as symbols of wealth, status, and security. The Renaissance brought new ideas about doors, architecture, and the relationship between public and private space. Renaissance doors weren't just functional barriers, they were architectural statements, carefully designed to complement the overall aesthetic of the building and to create the right impression on visitors and passers-by. Renaissance Italy, where much of the period's architectural innovation took place, was full of city-states competing not just politically and economically but aesthetically. The door of your palace wasn't just the entrance to your home, it was the face you presented to your rivals, your neighbours, and history itself. Renaissance doors were designed to impress, to intimidate, and to demonstrate that the person who lived behind them was someone to be reckoned with. Renaissance door design drew heavily on classical Roman and Greek precedents, but adapted them to contemporary needs and tastes. Classical proportions, classical decorative motifs, classical materials, but all executed with Renaissance craftsmanship and Renaissance sensibilities about beauty, harmony, and the relationship between form and function. The Renaissance also saw the development of new door technologies, particularly in the area of locks and security. Renaissance locks were mechanical marvels, incorporating springs, levers, and complex key mechanisms that were both more secure and more beautiful than their medieval predecessors. Renaissance locksmiths were among the most skilled craftsmen of their era, creating locks that were functional sculptures, pieces of mechanical art that happened to also keep people's belongings safe. Renaissance doors also reflected changing ideas about privacy and domestic life. Medieval houses had been relatively open, communal spaces where privacy was limited and most activities took place in shared areas. Renaissance houses, especially the houses of the wealthy, were designed with more specialized rooms, each with its own function and its own level of privacy. This meant more doors, more complex door systems, and more sophisticated ideas about who should have access to what parts of the house and under what circumstances. The Renaissance palazzo wasn't just a house. It was a complex social machine, designed to facilitate business, politics, and social networking as much as family life. Different doors provided access to different parts of this social machine. The main entrance for honored guests, side entrances for business associates, service entrances for servants and deliveries, private entrances for family members. Each door was designed not just to control access, but to communicate something about the status of the person using it. Renaissance artists and architects also began to think seriously about doors as artistic subjects. Doors appeared in paintings, not just as background details, but as important compositional elements. The Annunciation, one of the most popular subjects in Renaissance art, almost always featured a door or doorway, because the entire story was about the transition from one state of being to another, from human to divine, from ordinary to miraculous. The door in Annunciation paintings wasn't just architectural detail, it was theological symbolism. The Protestant Reformation, which began with Luther's posting on that church door, brought new ideas about doors and religious architecture. Protestant churches rejected much of the elaborate decoration and artistic complexity of Catholic churches, including their elaborate doors. Protestant church doors were simpler, plainer, more focused on function than form. The door wasn't supposed to inspire awe or fear. It was supposed to welcome believers into a community of equals. But this Protestant simplicity in religious architecture didn't extend to secular buildings. If anything, the Renaissance and post-Renaissance periods saw an explosion of creativity and elaboration in residential and commercial door design. As trade expanded and wealth increased, more people could afford elaborate doors, and craftsmen competed to create ever more impressive and innovative designs. The Baroque period took Renaissance door design and amplified it, made it more dramatic, more emotional, more overwhelming. Baroque doors weren't just entrances, they were theatrical productions, designed to create specific emotional responses in anyone who approached them. Baroque church doors were designed to inspire religious ecstasy, Baroque palace doors to inspire political submission, Baroque merchant house doors to inspire commercial confidence. Baroque door design incorporated new materials and techniques: gilt bronze, elaborate glass panels, complex curved and carved elements that would have been impossible or prohibitively expensive in earlier periods. Baroque doors were also larger, more imposing, designed for buildings that were themselves larger and more imposing than their predecessors. The Baroque period also saw the development of new types of doors for new types of buildings. Opera houses, for instance, required doors that could handle large crowds, while also maintaining the social distinctions that were so important to Baroque society. Opera house doors were designed with separate entrances for different social classes, ensuring that nobles, merchants, and common people could all attend the same performance without actually having to interact with each other in the lobbies or corridors. The 18th century brought the Enlightenment, and with it new ideas about reason, science, and social organization. Enlightenment door design reflected these values, emphasizing proportion, symmetry, and rational organization over the emotional excess of the Baroque. Enlightenment doors were still beautiful, still impressive, but they were beautiful in a more controlled, more intellectual way. Georgian architecture, which dominated English and colonial American building during much of the 18th century, developed distinctive door styles that reflected Enlightenment values. Georgian doors were typically painted in dark colors, fitted with brass hardware, and designed with classical proportions that were mathematically derived rather than intuitively felt. The Georgian door wasn't trying to overwhelm you with emotion. It was trying to demonstrate the homeowner's education, refinement, and understanding of classical principles. The 18th century also saw significant improvements in door hardware and security technology. Locks became more sophisticated, more reliable, and more standardized. Keys became smaller and more portable. The idea of having different keys for different doors, rather than one master key for everything, became more common and more practical. The Industrial Revolution of the late 18th and 19th centuries completely transformed door manufacturing and design. For the first time in human history, doors could be mass-produced rather than individually crafted. This meant that ordinary people could afford doors that would have been luxury items in previous eras. But it also meant that doors became more standardized, less individual, less connected to local traditions and materials. Industrial door manufacturing began in Britain and spread throughout Europe and North America. Steam-powered sawmills could produce standardized lumber, steam-powered machinery could cut precise joints and shapes, and steam-powered transportation could move doors from factories to construction sites anywhere in the country. The door was no longer necessarily connected to local materials, local craftsmen, or local architectural traditions. This industrialization of door production had both positive and negative effects. On the positive side, It made decent doors available to far more people than ever before. Working-class families could afford doors that were sturdy, well-fitted, and reasonably attractive. On the negative side, it led to a decline in traditional craftsmanship and a homogenization of door design that eliminated much of the regional variety that had characterized earlier periods. The 19th century also saw the development of new door technologies designed to meet the needs of increasingly urban, industrial societies. Fireproof doors for factories and commercial buildings, revolving doors for high-traffic buildings, automatic doors operated by mechanical systems, sliding doors for railroad cars and other mobile applications. The revolving door, invented in 1888, was a particular innovation designed to solve the problem of air circulation in large buildings. Traditional hinged doors, when opened frequently, allowed too much air to flow in and out of buildings, making heating and cooling expensive and inefficient. Revolving doors maintain a seal while still allowing people to pass through, reducing energy costs and improving comfort. The revolving door was one of the first examples of door design being driven primarily by engineering and economic considerations rather than aesthetic or social ones. The late 19th century also saw the development of the first true security systems for doors. Electric locks, alarm systems connected to doors and windows, and the beginning of what would eventually become modern home security technology. As cities became larger and more anonymous, traditional community-based security systems became less effective and technological solutions became more necessary. The 20th century brought unprecedented changes to door design and manufacturing, driven by new materials, new technologies, and new social needs. 2 world wars stimulated innovation in materials science, leading to new types of metal, glass, and synthetic materials that could be used in door construction. The development of plastics, aluminum, and advanced steel alloys gave door manufacturers new options for creating doors that were lighter, stronger, and more weather-resistant than traditional wood doors. The modernist architectural movement of the early and mid-20th century completely rejected traditional door design in favor of clean lines, minimal decoration, and emphasis on function over form. Modernist doors were often barely distinguishable from walls, designed to blend seamlessly into the overall architectural composition rather than to stand out as decorative elements. The modernist door wasn't supposed to make a statement about the homeowner's status or taste. It was supposed to be an invisible functional element that did its job without calling attention to itself. This modernist approach to door design reflected broader changes in 20th century society and values. The rise of democratic ideals, the decline of rigid social hierarchies, and the increasing emphasis on equality and accessibility all influenced door design. Doors became less about displaying wealth and status, and more about providing security, privacy, and convenience for everyone, regardless of their social position. The mid-20th century also saw the widespread adoption of standardized door sizes and construction methods. The 80-inch by 36-inch door became the American standard, while other countries developed their own standard sizes. This standardization made door manufacturing more efficient and made it easier for builders to plan and construct buildings, but it also further reduced the variety and individuality that had characterized earlier door design. The development of air conditioning in the mid-20th century changed the relationship between indoor and outdoor spaces, and therefore changed door design. When buildings weren't climate-controlled, doors were often kept open for ventilation, and the design had to accommodate frequent opening and closing. Air conditioning made it possible and desirable to keep doors closed most of the time, which meant that door design could focus more on insulation and weather sealing than on ease of operation. The suburban development boom of the post-World War II era created a huge demand for affordable, standardized doors for mass-produced houses. Suburban doors were designed to be attractive enough to create curb appeal, but inexpensive enough to be affordable for middle-class families. This led to the development of new door styles that combined traditional aesthetic elements with modern manufacturing techniques and materials. The late 20th century saw the development of increasingly sophisticated door security systems, electronic locks, keypad entry systems, and eventually smart locks that could be controlled remotely via smartphone apps. The door was no longer just a physical barrier. It was part of an integrated security and communication system that connected the home to the wider world of telecommunications and computing. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 mandated that public buildings provide accessible entrances for people with mobility impairments. This led to significant changes in door design, including wider door openings, automatic door operators, and hardware that could be operated by people with limited hand strength or dexterity. Universal design principles began to influence residential door design as well, as builders and homeowners recognized the benefits of doors that were easier for everyone to use, regardless of age or physical ability. The environmental movement of the late 20th century also influenced door design and manufacturing. Concerns about deforestation led to increased use of recycled and sustainably harvested wood, as well as alternative materials like bamboo and recycled steel. Energy efficiency became a major consideration in door design, leading to better insulation, improved weather sealing, and the development of doors specifically designed to minimize heat loss and gain. The 21st century has brought the digital revolution to door technology. Smart locks that can be controlled via smartphone, doorbell cameras that allow homeowners to see and speak with visitors remotely, and access control systems that can track who enters and leaves a building and when. The door is no longer just a physical object, it's part of the Internet of Things, connected to networks and databases and artificial intelligence systems. Contemporary door design reflects the complexity and diversity of modern life. Some doors are still traditional, made from wood with brass hardware, and designed to complement historical architectural styles. Others are aggressively modern, made from materials that didn't exist 20 years ago, and incorporating technology that would have seemed like science fiction to previous generations. Still others attempt to bridge the gap between traditional and modern, combining classic aesthetic elements with contemporary materials and technologies. The globalization of the 21st century has also influenced door design. Architectural styles and door designs that were once specific to particular cultures and regions are now available everywhere. You can buy Japanese-style sliding doors for your American house, or install American-style storm doors on your European home. This cultural cross-pollination has led to new hybrid door designs that combine elements from different traditions in new and sometimes unexpected ways. The rise of online shopping has transformed door purchasing and installation. Customers can now browse thousands of door options online, order custom doors manufactured in distant factories, and have them delivered directly to construction sites. This has made a wider variety of door styles and options available to consumers, but it has also further separated door design from local traditions and materials. Climate change and extreme weather events have also influenced contemporary door design. Doors in hurricane-prone areas are now designed to withstand much higher wind loads than previous generations. Doors in flood-prone areas are designed to maintain their integrity even when submerged. Doors in wildfire-prone areas are designed to resist heat and flame. The door is no longer just protection from ordinary weather and human threats. It's protection from an increasingly unpredictable and dangerous natural environment. The COVID-19 pandemic of 2020-2021 brought new considerations to door design and use. Concerns about disease transmission led to increased interest in touchless door systems, automatic door operators, and antimicrobial door surfaces. The pandemic also changed how people think about the boundary between public and private space, which has always been one of the door's primary functions. Doors became not just barriers against crime and weather, but barriers against disease, and door design had to adapt to this new reality. Contemporary smart door technology continues to evolve rapidly. Modern smart locks can be programmed to allow access to different people at different times, can send notifications when doors are opened or closed, and can be integrated with home automation systems to control lighting, heating, and security based on who is coming and going. Some smart doors can recognize faces or voices, eliminating the need for keys or codes entirely. The environmental impact of door manufacturing has become an increasingly important consideration. Traditional wood doors require harvesting trees, while metal doors require mining and smelting operations that consume large amounts of energy and produce significant pollution. This has led to increased interest in recycled materials, rapidly renewable materials like bamboo, and doors designed for easy disassembly and recycling at the end of their useful life. Universal design principles continue to influence door development. Modern doors are increasingly designed to be usable by people of all ages and abilities, with lever handles instead of round knobs, automatic operators for people who can't manually open heavy doors, and visual and audible signals for people with hearing or vision impairments. The goal is doors that everyone can use safely and independently, regardless of their physical capabilities. The security industry continues to develop new technologies for door protection. Biometric locks that read fingerprints, retinas, or DNA, reinforced door frames and hinges designed to resist forced entry, integrated alarm systems that can distinguish between authorized and unauthorized access attempts, video analytics that can identify suspicious behavior around doors and entrances. The door has become the focal point for an entire industry dedicated to protecting people and property from an ever-evolving array of threats. Architectural trends continue to influence door design in sometimes surprising ways. The tiny house movement has led to innovative space-saving door designs, including doors that fold, slide, or disappear entirely into walls or ceilings. The sustainable building movement has led to doors made from recycled materials, doors designed for maximum energy efficiency, and doors that incorporate renewable energy technologies like solar panels. The maker movement and digital fabrication technologies have made it possible for individuals to design and manufacture their own custom doors. 3D printing, CNC machining, and laser cutting allow hobbyists and small businesses to create doors with complex geometries and custom features that would have been impossible or prohibitively expensive using traditional manufacturing methods. This has led to a renaissance of individual creativity in door design, even as mass production continues to dominate the commercial market. Cultural and aesthetic trends continue to influence door design. The popularity of industrial design has led to doors made from raw steel, concrete, and other materials that emphasize their industrial origins. The popularity of rustic and farmhouse styles has led to increased demand for doors made from reclaimed wood, with hardware that emphasizes handcrafted rather than machine-made origins. The popularity of minimalist design has led to doors that are almost invisible, designed to blend seamlessly into walls and other architectural elements. The future of door design will likely be shaped by several continuing trends. Climate change will continue to drive demand for doors that can withstand extreme weather, while also providing excellent insulation and energy efficiency. An aging population will continue to drive demand for doors that are easier to use and more accessible. Urbanization will continue to drive demand for doors that provide security and privacy in dense, anonymous city environments. Technology will continue to be integrated into door design and operation. Artificial intelligence may eventually allow doors to learn the preferences and patterns of their users, automatically adjusting their operation for maximum convenience and efficiency. Advanced materials science may produce doors that are stronger, lighter, and more durable than anything currently available. Renewable energy integration may make doors that generate their own power for their electronic systems. But despite all of these technological and material advances, the fundamental function of the door remains the same as it was for our cave-dwelling ancestors. The door creates a boundary between inside and outside, between safe and dangerous, between private and public. The door gives us control over our environment and our interactions with other people. The door allows us to be alone when we want to be alone, and to be social when we want to be social. The door is also still, as it has always been, a powerful symbol. In literature and film, doors represent opportunity, mystery, transition, and change. The phrase, "When one door closes, another opens," reflects our understanding that doors are about more than just physical access. They're about life's possibilities and limitations. The door in our dreams often represents choices we need to make, changes we need to embrace, or fears we need to confront. Religious and spiritual traditions continue to use door imagery to represent profound concepts. The door represents the boundary between the sacred and the profane, between this world and the next, between ignorance and enlightenment. Many traditions speak of finding or opening the right door as a metaphor for spiritual growth and understanding. The door is simultaneously the most practical and the most symbolic of architectural elements. From the first rock rolled across a cave entrance to the latest smart lock controlled by artificial intelligence. The door has been one of humanity's most consistent and important innovations. We have never stopped needing doors, and we have never stopped improving them. Every generation has found new ways to make doors stronger, more secure, more convenient, more beautiful, or more meaningful. The history of doors is really the history of human civilization itself. How we build our doors reflects what we value, what we fear, what we aspire to, and how we understand our relationship to our environment and to each other. The door is the boundary between self and world, and how we construct and control that boundary says everything about who we are as individuals and as societies. So the next time you approach a door, any door, take a moment to appreciate the thousands of years of human innovation, artistry, and engineering that made it possible. That simple act of turning a handle and crossing a threshold connects you to every human who has ever needed shelter, security, privacy, or simply a way to keep the weather outside where it belongs. The door is one of our oldest technologies and one of our newest, one of our most practical innovations and one of our most symbolic, one of our most universal needs and one of our most personal expressions. The door stands between what was and what might be, between where you are and where you're going, between who you were when you approached it and who you might become once you cross the threshold. In that sense, every door is a portal not just through space, but through time, possibility, and meaning. Every door is both ending and beginning, both barrier and passage, both protection and invitation. The psychology of doors deserves special attention because it reveals something profound about human nature. We are the only species that creates artificial boundaries and then spends enormous amounts of time, energy, and creativity figuring out how to cross them. A bird doesn't need a door because a bird doesn't have the concept of inside and outside in the same way humans do. A fish doesn't understand privacy because a fish lives in an environment where hiding is about survival, not personal preference. But humans, we created the concept of the room, and then we needed doors to make rooms work. We invented privacy, and then we needed doors to maintain it. We developed the idea of ownership, and then we needed doors to protect what we own. The door is uniquely human because it serves uniquely human psychological needs that go far beyond simple physical protection. Consider the act of knocking. No other species knocks. Animals scratch, claw, bite, and force their way through barriers, but only humans have developed this ritual of announcing their presence and requesting permission to enter. Knocking is a social contract, a recognition that the space beyond the door belongs to someone else, and that crossing the threshold requires consent. The knock is a question, may I enter? The opening of the door is an answer, yes, you may, or sometimes if the door remains closed, no, you may not. The development of door etiquette reveals how sophisticated human social organization had become even in ancient times. Who could knock on which doors? When was knocking required and when was it optional? What kind of knock was appropriate for different situations? These weren't arbitrary rules. They were complex social codes that helped maintain order, respect, and hierarchy in increasingly complex societies. Different cultures developed different door customs that reflected their values and social structures. In medieval Japan, the sliding doors of traditional houses created a different relationship between inside and outside than the hinged doors of European houses. Japanese doors could be opened partially, creating gradual transitions between spaces, rather than the binary open-closed relationship of Western doors. This reflected Japanese cultural values about harmony, gradual change, and the importance of maintaining face in social interactions. Islamic architecture developed its own distinctive door traditions, influenced by religious requirements about privacy, gender separation, and the relationship between sacred and secular spaces. Islamic doors often featured complex geometric patterns rather than figurative art, reflecting religious prohibitions against depicting living creatures. These geometric patterns weren't just decorative, they were mathematical and philosophical statements about the nature of creation, infinity, and divine perfection. The Chinese developed door traditions that incorporated feng shui principles, the ancient practice of arranging living spaces to promote harmony and good fortune. Chinese doors weren't just positioned for convenience or security, they were positioned to channel positive energy and block negative influences. The color, material, and orientation of doors were all carefully considered to create the most auspicious possible environment for the people living behind them. Native American cultures developed their own relationships with thresholds and barriers, though these didn't always take the form of doors as Europeans understood them. Pueblo dwellings used ladders and elevated entrances that served some of the same functions as doors, but created very different relationships between inside and outside, between ground level and living space, between the community and the individual household. The colonial period in North America created interesting cultural collisions around door design and door customs. European colonists brought their door traditions with them, but these had to be adapted to new materials, new climates, and new social situations. Colonial American doors often combined European design principles with locally available materials and locally developed techniques, creating hybrid forms that were neither fully European nor fully American, but something new. Colonial American door hardware often had to be locally manufactured because importing hardware from Europe was expensive and unreliable. This led to the development of distinctive American hardware styles and techniques, created by blacksmiths who learned European methods but adapted them to American conditions and materials. Colonial American door latches, hinges, and locks became famous for their durability and functionality, qualities that were essential in a frontier environment where replacing broken hardware might require months of waiting for new supplies. The Victorian era brought unprecedented elaboration to door design, reflecting the period's general tendency toward decorative excess and its newly wealthy middle class's desire to display their prosperity and taste. Victorian doors weren't just entrances, they were statements about the homeowner's cultural sophistication, artistic sensibility, and social position. Victorian door design incorporated elements from multiple historical periods and cultural traditions, creating eclectic combinations that would have horrified earlier generations, but perfectly reflected Victorian confidence and optimism. Victorian door glass became particularly elaborate, incorporating stained glass, etched glass, beveled glass, and complex geometric patterns that transformed the simple function of allowing light through the door into an opportunity for artistic expression. Victorian door glass wasn't just functional, it was decorative, and it served the important Victorian function of allowing homeowners to see who was approaching while maintaining their privacy and dignity. The Victorian period also saw the development of elaborate door hardware, including ornate door knockers, decorative hinges, and complex lock mechanisms that were as much about display as function. Victorian door hardware often incorporated motifs from nature, classical mythology, and contemporary artistic movements, turning purely functional elements into opportunities for artistic expression and social display. The arts and crafts movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries was partly a reaction against Victorian excess, promoting simpler, more honest door designs that emphasized craftsmanship over decoration, natural materials over artificial ones, and functional beauty over purely ornamental display. Arts and crafts doors were still beautiful, but their beauty came from proportion, materials, and workmanship rather than applied decoration. The craftsman style, which developed from arts and crafts principles, created distinctive door designs that emphasized horizontal lines, natural wood finishes, and hardware that looked handmade even when it was factory produced. Craftsman doors were designed to look like they belonged to their houses and their landscapes, rather than like they had been imported from some other time and place. Art Nouveau, the international artistic movement of the early 20th century, brought organic, flowing lines to door design, creating doors that looked like they had grown rather than been constructed. Art Nouveau doors incorporated motifs from plant and animal forms, creating designs that seemed to pulse with natural energy and movement. These doors were often more sculptural than architectural, treating the entrance not as a barrier, but as a living, breathing part of the building's organism. The Bauhaus movement and other modernist schools completely rejected historical precedent in door design, starting from first principles and asking what a door should be in the modern industrial age. Modernist doors eliminated all unnecessary decoration, focusing purely on function, materials, and the honest expression of industrial production methods. Modernist doors were often indistinguishable from walls, designed to blend seamlessly into the overall architectural composition rather than to stand out as separate elements. The mid-century modern movement of the 1950s and 1960s created doors that celebrated new materials and manufacturing techniques while maintaining human scale and comfort. Mid-century modern doors often featured large glass panels that blurred the boundary between inside and outside, reflecting the period's optimism about technology, nature, and the possibility of creating perfect living environments through good design. The energy crisis of the 1970s forced designers and manufacturers to reconsider door design from the perspective of energy efficiency and resource conservation. Doors that had been designed primarily for aesthetic or symbolic purposes now had to also perform as thermal barriers, helping to reduce heating and cooling costs in an era of expensive energy. This led to the development of new insulation techniques, weather sealing methods, and design approaches that prioritized performance over appearance. The historic preservation movement, which gained momentum in the late 20th century, created new markets for traditional door designs and restoration techniques. As more buildings were designated as historic landmarks, there was increasing demand for doors that matched original designs and construction methods. This led to the revival of traditional woodworking techniques, the reproduction of historical hardware designs, and the development of new materials that could replicate the appearance of historical materials while providing better performance. The security industry's influence on door design accelerated in the late 20th century as crime rates increased in urban areas and suburban residents became more concerned about home invasion and property crime. Doors designed for maximum security often sacrificed aesthetic considerations for functional ones, leading to the development of doors that looked more like bank vault entrances than residential architecture. Steel doors, reinforced frames, and complex locking systems became standard features in many residential and commercial applications. The Americans with Disabilities Act and similar legislation in other countries forced designers to reconsider door design from the perspective of accessibility and universal usability. Traditional door designs that had worked well for able-bodied adults often created barriers for people with mobility impairments, visual impairments, or limited strength. This led to new hardware designs, new door operating mechanisms, and new approaches to entrance design that prioritized usability for all people rather than just the majority. Environmental consciousness and sustainability concerns have increasingly influenced door design and manufacturing in recent decades. Traditional door manufacturing often involved significant waste of materials and energy, and many traditional door materials came from non-renewable sources or required environmentally damaging extraction and processing methods. This has led to increased interest in recycled materials, rapidly renewable materials like bamboo, and manufacturing processes that minimize waste and energy consumption. The globalization of architecture and design has made door styles from around the world available everywhere, leading to interesting cultural hybridizations and sometimes to cultural appropriation concerns. It's now possible to buy Japanese-style sliding doors manufactured in China for installation in American houses, or to have traditional European door designs manufactured in developing countries using local materials and labor. This has made a wider variety of door styles available to more people, but it has also sometimes disconnected door design from its original cultural and environmental context. Digital design and manufacturing technologies have revolutionized door design and production, making it possible to create custom doors with complex geometries and precise specifications at costs that would have been prohibitive using traditional manufacturing methods. Computer-aided design, CNC machining, and 3D printing allow designers to create doors that would have been impossible to build using traditional hand tools and techniques. The internet and social media have changed how people discover, evaluate, and purchase doors. Online galleries, customer reviews, and social media posts allow people to see thousands of door designs and to learn from other people's experiences with different door types and manufacturers. This has democratized access to design information, but has also sometimes led to trend-driven decision-making that prioritizes fashionability over long-term functionality and satisfaction. Smart home technology integration has begun to transform door design and functionality in fundamental ways. Modern doors can incorporate sensors, cameras, communication systems, and automated controls that turn the simple door into a complex interface between the home and the outside world. These technological capabilities offer new possibilities for security, convenience, and energy efficiency, but they also create new vulnerabilities and dependencies that didn't exist with traditional mechanical doors. And that, ultimately, is why the history of doors is so fascinating and so important. Because the history of doors is the history of how humans have always tried to control their world while remaining open to its possibilities. How we have always sought security while still embracing change. How we have always needed boundaries while still believing in the possibility of crossing them. The door embodies this fundamental human contradiction, and that's why, despite all our technological advances and social changes, we still need doors. We still improve doors, and we still dream about what might be waiting for us on the other side.